Welcome to Pathways, Becoming Trauma Responsive, where we explore trauma through a compassionate lens, discover how these experiences affect each of us differently, and dive deeper into what it really means to become more trauma-informed. I'm your host, Dr. Elizabeth Meeker, Senior Director of the New York State Trauma Informed Network and Resource Center, funded by the New York State Office of Mental Health. The network advances the collective understanding of trauma, wellness and healing, and trauma-informed practices in action. This podcast is produced by CCSI. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the New York State Office of Mental Health or CCSI. Well, welcome, Vincent. We're so happy to have you on the podcast today, and also want to welcome you as one of our first storytellers and residents for the Trauma Informed Network and Resource Center. So I was hoping you could start off by introducing yourself to our guests.
Absolutely. Good morning. It's morning time right here. So my name is Vincent French, and thank you so much, Elizabeth, for having me. I appreciate this opportunity. This is definitely kind of awe-inspiring to be in this position and be able to share with you all. But again, my name is Vincent French. Currently, I am the diversity officer for the Monroe County Public Defender's Office here in Rochester, New York, Monroe County, New York. And I'm happy to be here today.
Great. Well, we are happy to have you. So I'd like to just start the conversation by kind of understanding what is your why, what is important about this work to you, why do you feel like it's important to embrace trauma-informed practices?
Well, for me, it stems largely to my background in just really reflecting the deep connection to understanding and supporting individuals who have faced challenges, whether through mentorship, community organizing, or even just equity work. And so, growing up in foster care and being adopted really shaped my sensitivity to the complexity of adversity. I was in foster care. I tell this story, but I was in foster care from 3 months old up until about 7 years old, with both myself, my other two trooper brothers split between another home, and then my other brother and sister, my older brother and sister, Govinda and Cedar French, they were in a different home as well. But these experiences obviously gave me a unique insight into the importance of compassion and just also the impact of systemic challenges that individuals face in their lives. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So it really sounds like it's personal for you that, it's not just about like, these are good things to do. It sounds like these practices maybe made a difference for you growing up as well, based on, kind of your experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, that lived experience is a lot, I pull on a lot, and not just going into foster care, but even also just, the trauma that I experienced that led me into foster care. Being in foster care, that experience was great. That was kind of the grounding factor in my life. But before that, what led me into that position, and you still feel that trauma in that space because you long for your family, you long to be with your siblings.
Mm-hmm.
So you do experience some sort of like push-pull kind of factor where you appreciate, the love and nurturing that you're getting in that space, but you always still want those connections, at least with your siblings that I wasn't connected to. And so, and then upon being adopted, kind of reintroduced back to a different level of trauma as well,
Mm-hmm.
which led to more trauma in life with just, falling into the legal system. And that's why too, so I also look at this work as far as trauma informed, both my own personal experience, but also the impact that has, even in my role as a community leader and doing the equity work and justice work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably getting off on tangents, but as a community leader and as a diversity coordinator here in the office, I often advocate for marginalized populations. This office was founded because of that in 1968, through the efforts of many here in Rochester. And understanding trauma obviously allows both myself and others who subscribe to it to engage with people emphatically and
Mm-hmm.
create inclusive spaces where they can feel seen, heard, and supported. And most pointedly, like in my role, I'm involved with the Public Defender's Office, obviously, but it also allows me to create different programs and outlets to be able to connect people back to the work and to opportunities, so they can see themselves outside of that traumatic experience and have a sense of hope.
Right, right. Yeah, and I'm curious because we don't necessarily always associate the justice system with trauma-informed and equity-focused practices. So I'm curious about kind of your role and kind of how you see these practices being embraced in the justice system and through the work that you're doing.
Yeah. And thank you for that question. So, obviously, so I'm not an attorney, but I work with a bunch of attorneys here. We're probably one of the largest law firms within the area, within the region. And, it's important that with a trauma-informed or trauma-informed lawyering lens, that we are able to speak with our clients, really, understand the trauma that they're facing, and be able to help them navigate those spaces. We have social workers that work upstairs as our mitigation specialists, and they are working tirelessly to connect our clients that we're serving to various resources, while they're going through their cases or even after. It's a really wraparound holistic approach. That is also something that my supervisor or the head public defender, Judy Sianka, is
Mhm.
encouraging, but also having that trauma-informed lens, or trauma-informed lawyering lens, will also impact the actual attorney themselves, because they can also navigate those spaces when they're looking at evidence and what have you.
Mhm.
Um, and then just creating opportunity throughout to help create hope. And I keep saying opportunity because one of the things that I did here in this space is create the Defenders of Tomorrow program.
Mhm.
So the Defenders of Tomorrow program is a program that was designed with the intention of, I like to say in very colorful language, stretch the mind's eye, right?
Mhm.
Getting young students to stretch their mind's eye to see themselves in public defense, right? If not as an attorney, then as a paralegal, even as a judge, even, or
Mhm.
anything within the justice system, but be able to see themselves in that space with purpose so that they can then kind of disrupt the way the system is being implemented as it is now, or as it
Mhm.
was designed. Because I feel like the system is designed the way it's supposed to, and it's working. You keep saying it's broken, but it's not. It's working exactly the way it's supposed to,
Right.
in all its perceived foibles.
Mhm.
But the Defend Tomorrow program allows high school students between 10th and 12th grade to come through the office, learn about public defense, and then there's also like a shadowing and also an internship component attached
Mhm.
to it, so that when they do go to when they do graduate from high school, they would have already potentially served in our office as Defenders of Tomorrow, 3 years, because 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. But even if not, even if they just do for the 1 year, 10th grade, and decide not to
Mhm.
come back for 11th or 12th grade year for shadowing or internship opportunities, they can still then intern with us in their undergrad and also as law students. So,
Mhm.
we're really trying to bring, especially here in Rochester, we're trying to develop our pool of attorneys,
Yeah.
attorneys from here for here.
Uh-huh.
Oftentimes we pull from attorneys from various schools, especially in New York, Albany,
Mhm.
Syracuse, Buffalo, Ithaca, and then all around other spaces. And that's good because that provides a diversity of thought. But we also still need to have a representation here of attorneys that understand the culture here in Monroe
Right.
County,
Yeah.
that can help navigate. And so, having attorneys in that space, and creating opportunity for young students to see themselves in this space, I think is paramount.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's so many things that you said in there that I just think are so aligned kind of with trauma-informed practices in terms of creating hope, creating a sense of, oh, I could see myself in this space, and those relationships that are so important for young people, that someone sees me, someone cares about me, someone sees a future for me that maybe I haven't seen for myself. So, there's so many elements to a program like that that might
Mhm.
not be spoken but are so impactful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm wondering just other ways in which, you bring trauma-informed and equity-focused practices kind of into your work, both with the people that you're serving, but also, I'm hearing you talk about your colleagues too, and the importance of them understanding these practices.
Yeah. So one of the ways I bring trauma-informed practices is through the art of storytelling. I think oftentimes, it's great to have like the strategies, right? Like
Right.
things you can do, right? Educating on trauma, normalizing conversations, and highlighting intersectionalities, right? And those things are, to me, are important, right? And I don't mean to say like that in mocking terms, but I think
Right.
when we stick to these terms, it seems there's a disconnect. And so like even the idea of, those intersectionalities, right? That's important. That's an important concept.
Right.
Um, Allowing people to not be alienated from this. Like it's not like trauma informed. Oh, we all experience it. We've
Right.
all, you talk about ACEs and stuff and people yelling at you or having a family that's been to jail or, drug abuse. We all know somebody
Mm-hmm.
either in our immediate family or uncle or aunt or brother or cousin, somebody, a best friend, someone in a relationship. We all experience it, but I think obviously it's important to educate, and so I try to educate, not having such like these like. Let me pull out this little slide deck real quick and go
Yeah.
over the points, but really having those intersectionalities, having those conversations, normalizing the storytelling. So that people can see themselves in the work. And so, I won't always necessarily use the terms 'cause I think that can be kind of off-putting for a lot of people.
Right.
They switch into like a different mindset when they hear like these canned terms, but really again just the art of storytelling and normalizing the intersectionalities, normalizing the humanity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I first started this position, I said, because prior I was in Pittsford as a diversity officer from Pittsford schools. And when I was interviewing for this position, I told him, I said, you need to have someone in this role that is okay being vulnerable, right? That can show you their humanity and then ask for the other person's humanity and then demand more from each other,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's what's most important is really kind of um just kind of willing ourselves down to our humanity. Like we have so many layers. Like I'm this diversity officer. You're not these positions. You're not the attorney.
Right.
You're serving as an attorney. You're serving as a diversity officer. But at the end of the day, you're just a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And I think oftentimes we get caught up with our associations in that our identity largely is shaped by those, and that's part of
Right.
our identity. I'm not trying to mitigate. I'm not trying to like denounce that. Like we are those things too, but like at the end of the day, we're all human beings.
Right.
And I think if we're able to connect on a human level, right, and say like, hey, this is what I experienced. Where's I show you my humanity.
Right.
Shows yours.
Yeah.
You know, and so continuously just having those conversations. So
Mm-hmm.
I try to tell these stories and I look for other people to have those stories too, or even bring those stories into my conversations. 'Cause
Mm-hmm.
I haven't lived everything, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I think that that's just so beautiful the way you describe that is kind of setting aside kind of our titles or our roles and just showing up as people and
Yep.
putting aside the jargon too, like, right? Because we can hide behind those terms as well,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
just speaking in plain language is through our experiences. Because to your point, like whether it's happened to ourselves, someone we love, like we all know someone who's gone through stuff and right, and if we can hang on to that and connect around the fact that we have that shared experience of pain, but we also have that shared experience of hope and resilience too. And that's where I think the storytelling can really play such a pivotal role, is to kind of see that when sometimes we can lose sight of that.
Right. Right. And again, you don't want to lose sight of that is to lose sight of your humanity,
Yeah.
and there's a lot going on. It's a lot
Hmm.
going on, and it's a lot going on in the world, and it's just really important at the end of the day to just kind of ground yourself, you know, to get back, like, get back to nature, get back to who
Yeah.
we are. I know we
Right.
started off before this conversation, we were talking about just, walking through nature and
Yeah.
even the picture right there with from Walter Henry Thoreau
Yeah.
from Walden, the book there, it's you need to have that grounding. And, and
Hmm.
and it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel pain. Like, you're not alone.
Right.
And I think, as we continue to talk about trauma informed whatever, right?
Yeah.
Trauma informed lawyering, trauma informed education, like kids don't, I'm by profession, I'm an educator. And so, I had like this little heart thing on my wall and I framed it and I had it
Yeah.
right at the center, both when students came in the classroom and when they came out the classroom, I would have it, outside of my
Right.
classroom door. And it said, kids don't care or students don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Mm.
And so, it comes down to everything, right? No one
Yeah.
cares what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like how you feed a person before you talk to them. Like they don't
Hmm.
care what you got to tell them. Like don't sit here and preach to me when I'm starving. Like I need
Right.
you. So if you care, you feed me and then you wait. It's like, oh, why'd you give me this? Because you wasn't gonna listen to me
Yeah.
unless you were fed, so
Yeah.
move those distractions. But, it does require professionals being equipped, both in education and healthcare, obviously
Yeah.
in law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
in public service, obviously having these tools to recognize and respond to trauma effectively.
Right.
I think New York State is moving towards that,
Mm-hmm.
probably more than other states. Again, I haven't looked at the data, but I like to think Excelsior, we're ahead of that's not true, but we try to be,
Yeah.
um, we try to be, as long as we're not last at the table, that's all that matters to me,
Yeah.
put our hat in the ring and really drive the conversations forward. And so, just really being equipped with trauma informed. And, I was thinking about something that happened recently, just this past weekend. I wrote an article about it, about trauma informed, the Clean Slate Act, I'm sorry,
Right.
and how that produced opportunities of hope for a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
for everyone, even myself included. Having the Clean Slate Act was legislation that for years was being deliberated upon and legislated on, and then it finally passed last year, but it went into effect this year in November, like a year later, it went into
Mm-hmm.
effect, and it had a lot of hands. A lot of hands went into lifting that legislation. While it's not perfect, it does provide opportunity for people and families to heal, right? To get their lives back, to be able to see that beyond the worst mistake that they ever made on the worst day of their life, that there's yet hope, that they can then turn it around. Growing up, in foster care, like I said, growing up in foster care, you start looking outside yourself for external validation. And that's something that I did. And I tell this kind of story a little bit here and there, but I looked outside myself for external validation, and that found myself in doing silly stuff,
Mm-hmm.
self-destructive stuff, petty larceny, stuff like that. But while I was going through it, I would journal. Right. So you talk about those strategies, like
Mm-hmm.
journaling is one of those things
Right.
to respond to trauma informed, like really just writing your thoughts upon paper, telling your story.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say it's important for people to tell their story, because if you let them tell it, if you let someone else tell your story, they'll probably tell it how you got to the top using go gadget skates. It's like
Right.
it was easy for you. Like, no, I crawled. There was tears. My eyeballs were sweating. Like,
Yeah.
my nails, like, like I was
Yeah.
on that rough side of the mountain kind of thing. And, but being in those spaces, I would journal and I would write down, and I would always kind of almost like manifesting, but I would describe in detail
Mm-hmm.
really about how I want my life to be, what I hoped for, what I dreamed of, what my family,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a lot of help. I'm not gonna act like it was by myself,
Right.
because there was a lot of people pouring into me,
Mm-hmm.
to the point that I became almost like that gourd of sorts,
Uh-huh.
now being able to pour back into other people,
Mm.
whether it's my students, whether it's attorneys, here in this office, and different community members and community leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because what I'm hearing, and as you talk about hope, it's both having that vision of what's possible and
Mm,
also the supports and a pathway to make it possible. Like, right, you need kind of both, is what I'm hearing.
yeah.
And, kind of love how you described, like, you experienced that, and now you're in a position to kind of be that for someone
Mhm.
else as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, just truly living your. I saw something the other day where they said, I forgot who wrote it. I wonder if it was Dr. Paul Miller here in town. It was someone. It was someone. I forgive, and forgive me for misquoting it, but it talked about just, oftentimes what makes us ineffective leaders is that we try to speak on things that we haven't lived. We
Mm,
try, like that's gonna happen, right? That's gonna
right,
happen, right? But the most impactful times is when we really pull from that lived experience, when we're able to
right.
really speak on, right, living the life that we're preaching, kind of thing,
Right.
modeling that behavior, and really speaking to it. Like when I'm talking and I'm mentoring to young students and I'm saying, hey, this is what you should do, because like I have like a bunch of journals here that like, you know, I have
Right.
a book here of journals, like a little cache of journals that
Yeah.
where you can look through and be able to, look at how far you've come along. I think oftentimes with trauma, we look at what we don't have.
Right.
We look at our hard situations, but I think oftentimes the solution to any disease is often within the disease, right? It is
Mm-hmm.
often within the disease, the
Right.
key, right? You talk about that. I got something I heard one day, like, the antidote is always in the disease, or it's always
Yeah.
in the healing. You can extract it, and there's the cure. And so, I think in our trauma, our freedom, our liberation, even, is in our trauma, and
Yeah.
it's embracing it, and then learning from it, and then reshaping it for a better purpose instead
Yeah.
of being for destruction. It can be used for hope,
Yeah.
right? But that requires, embedding empathy within the system,
Mm-hmm.
right? Holding space for empathy. I think oftentimes, we try to relate to people, and then because we don't relate, we just discard it, like, oh, I'm sorry you're going through that. But no, really sit with it for a second. Really listen to what that person is saying in
Yeah.
a vulnerable state. Don't just dismiss it. I have opportunity of talking to both students and just in my journey. I try to really listen and really hear what people are saying. And sometimes I don't always relate,
Right.
but what the germ, the common germ that's there is suffering,
Mm-hmm.
right? And suffering is supposed to produce compassion,
Right.
bitterness, not disdain, not apathy, right? You're supposed to pull on that,
Right.
and so, I try to be very acutely aware. I'm not always perfect. I'm not acting like I'm like this empathetic guru who always be able to,
Right.
and I don't always relate to everybody. But at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, I know we're human, and that's the commonality. And
Right.
so, some people say to live is to suffer. To be human is to suffer.
Right.
But to be human is also to be compassionate, right?
Absolutely.
And loving and empathetic, right? And I feel like, we talk about how, we continuously pass down trauma, but we
Mm-hmm.
can also pass down healing too.
Yes.
We
Absolutely.
can also
Absolutely.
pass down healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as you were talking, I was just, reflecting and thinking about, and it's hard to move towards the discomfort. Like when you're talking about the disease, like, right, it's hard to move towards that, but that's the only way through it. And
Yeah,
when we can be surrounded by people who are caring, who see us, who can, hold that empathetic space, it can provide that support to do that work.
yeah.
But yeah, but the only way out is through. Yeah,
Got to go through it, and that's the
yeah,
key word, right? That's the
yeah,
key. Going through it, right?
yeah.
Like, how you doing? I don't know. I'm going through it. Hey, but you're going through it
Through
though.
it. Yeah.
Right? Like, we got to look at the power of words. Words have meanings.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just semantics over here. Like, you really have to really speak life into every situation.
Hmm.
I grew up in a house that often went to church. I mean, like, man, we went to church when we didn't want to go to church. So we're starting an usher board. The Frenches have already signed up. Who wants to join them? Hey, we're going to be donating clothes this Saturday. The Frenches have already donated clothes. Who wants to help them fold them? Like, why are we always? It was a big family. It was like 11 of us, so we were
Okay.
always like the core of every
Uh-huh.
the building fund. The Frenches are already, so it's,
Uh-huh.
but just going through it,
Yeah.
really just going through it and being reflective and just, having something beyond yourself,
Yeah.
whatever that thing is. I'm not trying to subscribe to one particular religion here, but I
Right.
think it's important to believe in something beyond yourself, whatever
Hmm.
that thing is.
Right.
Um, and be able to see the light in other people. Like, it's really, I think about, mortality a lot, like my own mortality,
Uh-huh.
and every day just being the best version of you every single day and really looking to see the light,
Mm.
and I think it starts, I became acutely aware of it more in children, like
Hmm.
young children, really seeing the light in their eyes. Like,
Yeah.
children have a light in their eyes,
Yeah.
you know? And I think, as you continue to nurture that in my kids, it continues to burn brighter. But then you see adults that have it too.
Right.
And I often see how for some people it's hard for them to grab, like, is that real? Are they being fake? Like, no, that's really them. That's how they act. That's
Yeah.
really them. Like, that's
Yeah.
their personality.
Yeah.
Because earlier on, someone nurtured that,
Yeah.
someone fostered that, and no one squashed it. You know,
Yeah.
I saw a TikTok one day. It was this little girl. She was doing just crazy stuff, like just jumping off the couch,
Yeah.
wrestling her brother. Her brother was like 8. She was like 4.
Yeah.
And there's a woman's voice that says, "Hey, for all those with little girls in the world with fire in their eyes,
Yeah.
don't squash it. She's gonna need it." And I'm like, "For what?" And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
in the moment, I was like, "For what?" Because she's out here doing wild stuff. Like,
Yeah.
no one's gonna call her. I'm like, no, don't squash the
Gosh,
light.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
You
And
know,
yeah, and I just, as you were describing that, I was thinking about what if we were all nourishing and sparking that light in each other? Like, where could that take us
yeah.
collectively? Yeah.
as an individual, as a
Yeah.
community, as a
Yeah.
collective, as a nation, as a world.
Yeah.
I think we get caught up, in our own minutia of things,
Yeah.
and we fail to see the light in other people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So this has been a wonderful conversation. And as we kind of bring it to a close, I'm just, wondering if you had kind of one final kind of piece of advice or experience that you'd want to share that you think could kind of advance this work. What's that one thing that you want to?
I think for again, I'm an English teacher,
Uh-huh.
and for me, books, literature. In this work, I think for true liberation, for true freedom of being able to connect with our stories, being able to connect with one another, it requires literacy. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, that will have a strong impact on how we see the world.
Yeah.
People always, they always talk about like in leadership courses, read the biographies, read the autobiographies of so and so and Churchill and Malcolm X and all these people like that. And it's like, yeah, read those stories,
Yeah.
because it's through them that we're able to tell our own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that's for me is what it is. I think literacy will produce a liberation,
I
which
love
will
that.
allow us to be able to have the words, to be able to tell our story. I think that's really what stops a lot of people from being able to
Mm-hmm.
tell the stories in certain spaces that really need to tell those stories.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up on, I know you said one last thing, so I was supposed to be like a little small soundbite, but, growing up on the North Sea side of the city, and even now, that's one of our main hotbeds of activity that's happening in the city,
Mm-hmm.
is the neighborhood that I grew up in. So, it's kind of a source of pride for me, knowing that I came from that space, that it still has a lot of trauma there, but I was able to come from that and make something of myself, through a lot of help and support, obviously, from other people.
Right.
But there's a lot of people that don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Both here in my neighborhoods, in this county, in various spaces, even in affluent spaces. Like,
Yeah.
let's be real. Like in Pittsburgh too. Like, it's everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
in all parts of New York and the nation. But I think through books and being able to see how people articulate their harm, how people are able to articulate their journey, will then provide those words, those word
Yeah.
acquisitions, to be able to then tell their story.
Yeah.
I think in doing that, if people are able to tell their story, it will give them their wings they need. It'll give them the motivation they need to turn the page.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I just, as a lifelong reader, that resonates very strongly with me.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot there. So,
Yeah.
well, Vincent, I just want to thank you so much for your time and sharing of yourself and your experience, your story. I think there's a lot that people will resonate and be able to take away with them. So thank you so much.
No, and again, thank you for having me. I do appreciate this opportunity to share and connect with you all. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Please visit our website, traumainformedny.org, for additional trauma responsive resources, events, and training opportunities. Subscribe to our podcast to be notified when our next episode is released.